Holy Week is here. And we're given in the lectionary these preparations for the holiest days of our year as they get here on Thursday. We're given in our first readings this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 3 of what they call the suffering servant psalms from the book of the prophet Isaiah. We heard from chapter 42 today. We'll hear from 49 tomorrow, chapter 50 Wednesday. And then on Good Friday, we'll hear from chapter 52 and 53. And I might encourage you as you deepen your preparation for the Paschal Triduum to pick up your Bible or Google it and read through those Psalms, learning about who Jesus is for us. Today we hear that the servant is one in whom God is well pleased. The Father is well pleased, upon whom I have put my Spirit, anointed with the Spirit, to facilitate, among other things, a covenant for the people, a covenant we renew every Mass, to open the eyes of the blind, to bring out prisoners from confinement and from the dungeon those who live in darkness. This is who Jesus is. And this week, it says, a bruised reed he shall not break, and a smoldering wick he shall not quench. Yes, he has preached boldly, but this week he prepares for his death. And today we hear about that preparation. Going to a place he was very familiar and was quite the hero at, having brought back Lazarus from the dead. They threw a party for him, and I can only imagine it was quite the party. And there were, in contrast to his typical time there were invariably lots of other people curious, open, because of what he did in Lazarus. So struck by the fact of his presence and also aware with the rumblings in the community and his own prophecy that his death was near, we hear that Mary breaks open a jar of aromatic spikenard. And in contrast to typical anointings on the head, she anoints his feet. Judas, closed to what Jesus had come to do, and as we hear, a thief, complains about this lavish affection for Jesus. 300 days' wages, a full year's wages, that liter of oil, which would have filled the whole house with a most beautiful smell. 300 days is the amount of days you get to work if you take Saturday off, the Sabbath. And he was upset because he couldn't have it. But she was broken open in love for him. What does Jesus say? First, he reminds them of his impending death. Let her be. Let her generosity abound for the rest of time as a sign of our own calling to pour out our wealth for him. But then he says, the poor you will always have with you, but me, not so. The poor are always with us, not necessarily materially poor, but spiritually poor. And they're with us now, even in the absence of our ability to get out and celebrate the sacraments as frequently as we're used to. The poor invite us out of ourselves, or they, in rejecting them, close us in on ourselves. I was recently in Steubenville, Ohio, because you can still go to confession there, or at least you could a couple days ago. They may I hear in West Virginia you need a driver's license now to buy booze. Maybe in Steubenville you'll need one to have your confession heard. I don't know. But as I got out of my car, a fella came up and he's like, "Can you help me out?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "What does that mean?" Well, we're kind of in a pandemic mode here, buddy. He's like, "Well, I'm good." I'm like, "Well, I don't know if I am. Spend a lot of time around these guys. Hope I don't have coronavirus," but I wanted a couple dollars and was able to. I had actually just hit the Purell thing in my door in my car, and I gave him a couple dollars, but it was this challenge in the face of this time of fear to still do something. Are we open to the poor? Are we open to our own poverty that's being shown right now and the generosity of others? It's a great opportunity to ponder that question as life has changed so much so quickly. And then he finally says, but as I already mentioned, but I will not always be with you. You will not always have me. And we can listen to that and think, well, that's because he was going to go and die and then rise from the dead and then get ascended into heaven. But if we're not careful, we lose Jesus in our own lives. The poor always show up, but we can be far from him. We can put him real low on the priority list. We can get to Mass when it's, legal, only when it's convenient, when there's not a soccer game or a hockey game or a tailgate, or we don't have to work that day. All of those things, even relative to Sunday Mass, but we can put prayer at the lowest end of our priority list and just throw off a couple Hail Marys or Our Father at the end of the day. And the Lord knows that when we do that, he is willing, but we aren't. And Mary today is this image of challenge for us in this Holy Week to become his. She poured out her wealth. That oil could have lasted so long. You can buy 5 ounces of that stuff for about $66, which even in today's economy, although I think you get some cheapy stuff on Amazon, is still about $13,000. She poured it on his feet. What wealth in our lives are we holding back from Jesus? We don't want him to touch. Is it our time? Is it our 401k, which is inevitably lower than it once was? Is it our energy? What are we holding back? Jesus isn't going to bruise the wick, the smoldering wick, or the bruise. He isn't going to force us, but he invites us. Will we accept the invitation as this week we see how much he loves us? Or will we hold back. She is there at his feet. Not only that day, but we know she was regularly present at his feet, just listening to what he had to say. And so in addition to considering the wealth in our lives that the Lord might desire for us to lavish upon him, especially this Holy Week, we also want to ask for the grace to receive him by listening, by pondering, by considering all that he's done in our life, all the sins that he's forgiven, all the mercy he's bestowed on us, all the transformation he's facilitated in our lives and others, all that we need more from him as we ponder his passion and consider his resurrection. Beg for the grace to live these days not as Judas, not as Peter, not as the crowds with their fickle hearts or worse, but as Mary, pouring out our hearts, pouring out our wealth, and open to the hundredfold he desires to give us in return.